This is a banking platform built by bankers for bankers, right? So our founders were in the banking industry. They knew that the conversation with clients was really going the wrong direction, right? It was always about product and they needed to bring it back to the client. And so they formed this company to help with data and insights, to bring data and insights to clients.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Going Beyond the Deal podcast. Today, we have on the episode Blake Balsamo, the Executive Director for the Americas for I2I Logic. Today, we're going to get into Blake's jump from a very successful commercial banking career into selling technology into commercial banks. We're going to talk about the future of commercial banking and how AI is going to have a part of it. And what are the things that we should be doing? How should we be having conversations with customers? How do we differentiate ourselves in the market as bankers? I think this is something that you're not going to want to miss. Whether you're a business owner looking to work with a bank or you're a banker looking to see what's coming in the future, this is the episode for you. Look forward to you joining us. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Going Beyond the Deal podcast. Today, I have my friend, Mr. Blake Balsamo, Executive Director for the Americas for I2I Logic. Welcome to the show, Blake.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael.
Hey, so I'm going to just give a little bit of background to the listeners, like how we know each other. So,
Sure.
Blake is this, very well-respected, commercial banker that I've heard of and I have known of out in the market when I was a commercial banker. Back in the day, former commercial bankers here talking about banking, but we both sit on the board of the Association for Corporate Growth for here in New Jersey, part of the kind of executive leadership team. So have had the pleasure of getting to know Blake and, help kind of forge the new path for ACG in New Jersey, which has been a lot of fun. But what I always like to say, it's really funny, is there's three really, really strong bankers, right, that were out there. I'm going to include myself as one of the three commercial bankers out there. So there was myself, Blake Balsamo, and then Ashley Sarkhan. The three of us all left commercial banking at the same time. Some of the most well-known commercial bankers that everybody wanted to try to hire, we totally left the industry. So I got to know from you, Blake, why did you leave the industry?
Well, first of all, I love the hype because I think amongst the three of us, we would probably all argue we were the same best three commercial bankers.
Yes.
But there's plenty of good ones out there. It's funny. I left commercial banking because an opportunity arose, right? Like, I think that's why a lot of people leave the industry that they're in, is because there's an opportunity that comes up that you just feel like you can't pass up. And mine was I2I Logic. I was approached by the owners of I2I Logic to help build out their North and South American business in the midst of actually trying to close a few deals. And so it was very stressful trying to close deals while also having this hang over my head of, do I want to just completely step outside of the industry and try something new? And, I took the leap. And it was a really tough decision, and I relied on my mentors and a lot of discussions to see if it was the right decision for me. And it's been a little over a year now, and it's been great. Just trying to get out of that cycle of that big commercial banking world. It's just been a really cool learning experience for me.
So taking the leap, I like that statement. I mean, people ask me, like, okay, you went from this great commercial banking career, where you have I don't know, it's like, I want to say like 3 square meals a day, right? Like you get comfortable 6-figure salary plus bonus, like everything is great, but you also have like meeting after meeting and, TPS reports and everything else that we had to do for this. But to take the leap from something that's pretty certain, something that we've gotten pretty comfortable with, right? We both have amazing networks. We have people that trust us. We had a constant, source of deal flow. And then essentially we both went to, I don't want to say startups, right? But a riskier proposition. What was the tipping point for you to take that leap?
Yeah, it's interesting. I always come back to the same saying of you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I always thought it was in the source of deals, right? It was in the source of reaching out and trying to start a relationship with a company from a cold start, right? It's a very uncomfortable feeling, but you have to be very comfortable in that. And I never thought that that would translate into my actual life from there, right? In this idea of I got so used to being uncomfortable that it became comfortable being a banker, right? You did a lot of the
Yeah.
same stuff. You had a lot of the same network. You reached out for a lot of the same things. And so all of a sudden I found myself so comfortable and I'm like, I miss that idea of being uncomfortable and trying something new and being in a different space, right? And reaching out to a completely different network of people and building that up. And so I think that that tipping point for me was it got really comfortable. It got comfortable doing the same thing and having the same network and reaching out to the same businesses. And yes, that the salary was great and the bonuses were great, right? But then it reached a point where I'm like, okay, I need to reinvent myself somehow and I need to stand out a little bit. And this was a great way to do that.
Yeah. And you know what's funny is I think there's probably less, there is, it was getting to the point where there was less and less comfort in the commercial banking space, right?
Yeah.
You would think you'd have this, right down the fairway deal.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's like, the bank's like, well, we don't like that flavor of ice cream anymore. And it's like, well, what do you mean? It's vanilla. It's got the sprinkles. It's got a cherry on top. Lots of deposits coming with it. And they're like, yeah, sorry. No, we don't like that. But last year it was the thing that they liked. So it was hard for us to kind of navigate this. And it's like, okay, so we're going to bet on what the people above us decide, or should we forge our own path? So we did.
Yeah. And it's really funny too, because in the commercial banking space, every banker feels the exact same thing, right? The flavor of ice cream of the year, right? It's those bankers that are able to predict what the next flavor is going to be that are really successful, right? They understand how the banks go through these cycles and whether you're going through deposit or loan gathering, right? If you want fee-based revenue or if you just want asset-based revenue, right? And so how do you figure that out, that algorithm out, right? And a lot of bankers kind of just go through that motions and begrudgingly follow that motion, right? They're constantly in this motion of, okay, now it's deposits today. And so now I have to go gather deposits. And I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I'm going to go make a bunch of calls and see who has deposits and try and bring them into the bank. And before you know it, by the time you start bringing deposits in, the entire script has flipped into loan gathering. And so you're in this constant cycle of refresh.
Yeah. But I think what's a cool thing about you is, and what you're doing now is you're in the process of changing the game when it comes to corporate and commercial banking, which is super exciting for me. And that's why I love our rapport and our friendship, because, we talk about all these war stories of, bringing in, double digit deals, to the bank, and only for that we think are, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, the best ice cream in the world, the best flavor ever. And then the bank goes, well, I don't know about that. Right. So the fact that you have been able to leave this industry and then forge the new path. And, I think it's a great segue to kind of talk, to get into what we're going to talk about today. Is I wanted to have Blake on the show, not only because he's a brilliant commercial banker, brilliant networker, great friend, etc. I want Blake to be able to give our listeners, whether they be bankers themselves or potential clients of banks, to kind of give us a little bit of a preview as to what you see the future of commercial banking looking like, so that we can be ready for it. So is that fair enough, Blake?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, happy to do that.
Cool. So let's get into a little bit about your background. Where'd you go to college? How'd you get into banking? What was your entree into this field?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So if you told me 15 years ago that I was going to be a banker when I grew up, that was the wrong that was the wrong decision, right?
What was the
So,
original thing when you were a little kid?
yes.
What was the thing?
So
What was your job?
the original plan when I went to college, so I went to a small liberal arts school in New York called Marymount Manhattan College. So I was one of very few business students. I was a double major in accounting and finance with a minor in economics. And my goal going to college was to work for a 3-letter agency for the government. I wanted to investigate white collar crime. That was my goal. And so throughout school,
since you were like 5 years old, you wanted to investigate.
So if you asked me when I was 5, I just wanted to be a worker, and what that meant was I wanted to be a construction worker. I wanted to work on a truck or something. And then that goal quickly changed when my parents were always like, "Well, you're going to be a garbage man with a bachelor's degree," and I was like, "Cool." No,
that would have been hilarious. Though,
yeah,
if at 5 years old somebody was like, "So Blake, what do you want to be?" It's like, I want to
FBI.
investigate white collar crimes.
Yeah, that'd be great. No,
listen, I have a 6-year-old, and she like, it wouldn't surprise me if she said something like as poignant as that when you ask her. But
I mean, that's the thing. It's like TV has such an impact on you, right? And so like you see FBI agents, that's what I want to do. No, but it's funny. So I went to school to work for a 3-letter agency, and throughout school I had a very strong work ethic. I usually worked 3 jobs. My sophomore year, I was an RA. I worked for Goldman Sachs, and I was a student worker at the school, and so I worked a lot. And then that job at Goldman Sachs was really a turning point for me, right? I worked in the tax division at Goldman. And that was just through networks. Honestly, that was through people I knew, people who knew other people got me an interview, and I got the job. And so that was a point where I was very surprised that I would end up in that world. And then throughout college, I worked at Goldman and then JP Morgan. And when I graduated, I was in the process of interviewing and all the other such for a 3-letter agency. But that process is very long. And so I knew it was going to be a long time. So I had to take a job. And at that point, I was already aligned with banking, right? And so I got a job working for CitiBank in Dallas, Texas. And I did 4 months of training in New York for CitiBank before I left for Dallas. I moved to Dallas. And as I was in Dallas, I was flying back and forth to Washington, D.C. and doing interviews and polygraph tests. And they were interviewing my family and friends and teachers and all the other such. And then the day came. I actually I got an offer letter from a 3-letter agency, and that dream had come to fruition. The problem is that in banking, you make a lot of money from the start. They pay you very well. And so I got a job offer where I would be taking a massive pay cut. And at that point, you become very comfortable in this lifestyle, right? That idea of being comfortable. And I couldn't take it. I had to turn the job down because my life path took me somewhere else. And that was the path I was following.
Very cool. So, hey, real quick, so you moved to Texas, but MMC is in New York State, right? So are you a New Jersey guy? Did you grow up in New Jersey? Give me a little bit.
I've been all over. So I grew up. I grew up in New Jersey. So I grew up in the Toms River area, and then I went to school in Manhattan at Marymount Manhattan College. And then I had no ties to Dallas. I knew nothing about Texas at the time, and I took the leap. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to try something new. And they moved me to Texas, and it was an interesting experience. A Jersey boy in Texas is very interesting, and you get immersed in the culture, and you make a bunch of friends. And Dallas still holds a very special place in my heart today. I still love visiting.
So you were part of Citi's risk, commercial risk team, which is very interesting to go from risk to then client-facing roles.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
It's funny. I tell everyone, I think everyone should start in risk. It gives you a really good sense of like what the bank's appetite is, what their concerns are, what industries they like, what industries they don't like, how they approve credits, right? So I got a really good ground base for what the bank was looking for and how credit policy played a role in that. And I reached a point in risk where, somebody that's an analyst in risk, it takes a while to go through the ranks, right? And to try to advance your career. But without having that business experience, it's kind of meaningless. So I decided, you know what? I've had my time in Texas. I enjoyed my time in Texas, and I had a network of people back in New Jersey. Shout out to Beth Perricone. Thank you for doing that. She helped me get a job working for Jim Ernest, who is another one of my mentors. And I moved to the business side and helped start bringing deals in and underwriting new deals. And that was a really interesting change because now I have this risk background to help with that whole thing.
I was going to say, Jim Ernest is a hell of a guy.
Yeah.
Amazing banker. Very lucky to know him and actually kind of get to know him more through you and Con Lee and that whole great group of bankers. But real quick, before we kind of go on to that part, can you give us we were joking around saying, certain banks like certain flavors of ice cream. And I find it tends to be kind of industry specific, right? Maybe a bank gets burned by one type of industry and then they're like, okay, we no longer want to focus on that. We like these industries. But just from a credit policy standpoint, for someone that's never applied, for a commercial loan, is there like a general set of kind of underwriting policies that you'd think would be like kind of across the board? Everybody is going to look at these couple things. And I don't mean to put you on the spot. I just think it's helpful for people to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, every bank has their own credit policy, right? They underwrite based on a specific set of parameters that they want to meet. Most of the time, the top of the list is the returns. Second on that list is usually the type of industry. So a lot of times for bigger banks, heavy cash industries are really tough because there's a lot of anti-money laundering. There's a lot of things that happen in cash-based businesses that just cause a lot of angst. So it depends on the type of business. It depends on what their value proposition is, right? CitiBank their value proposition is international, right? They're a very international bank. And that was the value proposition for the commercial bank is they like to focus on international. They like to help in a lot of different regions around the world. And so depending on what bank you go to, there may be a risk officer that got burned in the toy industry and they don't want to do anything in toys. It is a people-based business. So there are different people that have different experiences in different industries, and they may just not like a certain industry for some reason. And that's for them to decide, right? That's for the bank to decide if that's something that they want to get into. And then you've got the other extreme, right? You've got Silicon Valley, who went into the tech industry with no revenue, no net profit margin, right? Like they knew how to operate that industry. And so a lot of banks were hands off. They don't want to do that type of business, but they found their niche. They found exactly what they wanted to do, and they were very good at it. So there are it really depends bank to bank. You can have a very different risk appetite depending on where you go.
Yeah, very, very cool. So let's move into talking about eye-to-eye logic. I mean, obviously a successful, commercial, I hate to say pigeonhole you, right? Successful banker, you pretty much, listen to me, we get phone calls all the time from existing banks to, other organizations. I mean, it's not hard for us to find a job based on our experience, right? I decided to make the leap from traditional banking to investment banking because I saw the trend going where my clients really needed that same type of service and sophistication that I got with helping them with their traditional financing needs as they started to get to these inflection points where things were changing. I2I has a really unique value proposition to the market, and it's really changing the way that people are looking at data and things like that. I'm sure you had like more than just I2I logic reaching out to you. What was the reason for you to make the move from that successful career to I2I Logic? What made them special to you?
Yeah. So at one of my previous banks, I actually used the I2I Logic platform as a banker. And I immediately picked up the value of the platform, right? As a middle market banker, it's really tough to bring in new clients because every bank is the same. I don't care who they are. Every bank does the same thing. And it's always, I'm going to bring my business card and a pitch deck on the bank to a prospect meeting, to a client meeting. And the only thing they talk about is the bank. They don't talk about the company that they're there to meet. And so they spend an hour-long conversation talking about all the great ways that their bank can help. And when I started using the platform at one of my previous banks, I was able to change that entire script, right? I didn't start my meeting talking about my bank and my products. I started my meeting talking about the company. How are they performing within their industry? Are there certain hurdles that they're trying to cross? And I had a lot of data and insights to back up that discussion. So I would be asking them questions that their bank, their existing bank, hadn't been asking them in years, because I wanted to truly understand the business. I wanted to understand where the cash was coming from, what their client interactions were like, what their issues were, where their warehouses were, if they had issues with inventory, right? Because none of that has to do with the bank. I want to get to the pain points that the company is facing, because there is likely a banking product that I can offer up, or a person in the market I can refer them to that will help them with those problems. It was never a means to an end for the sale of the product. It was always, how do I help the company? Because the sale will come later. I'm not worried about the sale. There's a pipeline to be had there. It's, how do I help this company get to the next level? Do they want to go public? Do they want to sell the business? What do they want to do? What is their plan? And a lot of times people don't take a minute just to understand that first. They're so focused on their own needs. They're so focused on, how do I get the deposits? How do I get the loan? How do I get that fee-based income? And we have to flip that script, because clients are getting sick of it. They're really getting sick of hearing the same pitch over and over and over again about how great their bank is and how much better they are than their existing bank, right? All of these things that clients do that, or companies do that 10 times a week. They have those conversations. They get those emails in. It's so inundating. And so how do we help them? So that's what really made me kind of switch to this type of industry, is because I saw the value immediately. I knew that this platform can bring another layer of conversation and show true thought partner relationships from the moment you log into it, to show a company exactly how they're doing and give them real advisory type services.
Yeah, I love this. It's, I always call this, needs-based selling, right?
Yeah.
And that's something, I think the reason why you and I, closely, became friends is we understand the value of needs-based selling instead of just dumping product on people. And I always think, like, so your start in banking was on the risk side. I started as a teller, I started as the, baby steps to get into banking. And I never will forget. It's like, okay, well, this month we're selling credit cards. So anybody that comes into the bank, ask them about their credit card needs. That's like forcing something down somebody's throat, right?
Yeah.
Just like when you walk into a bank and they go, oh, so do you have a credit card? And you're like, no, I have plenty of credit cards. I don't need another credit card. Why are you even talking to me about that? Why don't you ask me about, hey, you see me depositing something into my daughter's checking account?
Yeah.
Maybe then start asking questions around, hey, what are your future plans for saving for your kids? Things like that. So, basically what you're telling me, and what I understand with I2I, this is a really great tool for people to start having better conversations. And I love what you said. And again, like, this is something I'll take with me to the grave. I love going into a situation and saying, hey, I might not be able to help you, but I know someone who can, right? Not like, I can't sell this person something, right? You could be like, no, but I know the right person for you to talk to. So tell me about, like, who formed I2I Logic? What was like, tell me about their background. Like, how did they come up with this idea? And then just let's get into, like, break it down. How does a product work? Tell us more about the product itself.
Yeah. So the company was formed in 2013. So our founders were from the banking industry. What we like to tell everyone is this is a banking platform built by bankers for bankers, right? So our founders were in the banking industry. they knew that the conversation with clients was really going the wrong direction, right? It was always about product and they needed to bring it back to the client. And so they formed this company to help with data and insights, to bring data and insights to clients. But if you ask our founders, what inevitably happened is we had to reinvent ourselves over the years, right? We're not backed by any equity providers. We have no outside debt, right? We are completely bootstrapped by our cash flows, and our founders did that for a reason. They wanted to build this company because they truly believed that it would help the commercial banking market, and so when it was built, it was about data and insights. And we are not a data provider, right? We don't just send our data to our clients and they can use it however they want. We've reinvented ourselves to be more about the conversation, right? It's about how do you enable your bankers to have a robust conversation using data and insights. It's not just delivering data and insights. And so when we talk about that, a lot of times bankers have this idea that, oh, they're just going to bring a pitch deck with all of our charts and graphs and everything on it and talk about that in front of their clients. But what we've realized is a lot of them lack the skill to talk about corporate finance based data and insights. So we spend a lot of time doing training, doing scenario analysis, trying to help people really understand the value of the charts and the graphs that you're looking at on the page. And so that's kind of where we've brought the company, and where we're bringing the company is a whole different story, right? With AI and generative AI and all of the things that come into that. But I think today where we see a lot of value is really reinventing that banker workflow. To get away from talking about the bank. And we're really reinventing it in a way where, our platform can be used everything from the prospecting stage right through portfolio management, and everything in between. A lot of cross-sell comes from our platform. A lot of portfolio management aspects come from our platform, red flag analysis, things like that, where we can really start helping them in a way where the platform steps outside of what is traditional banking.
Got it. So if you don't mind me, just a kind of more niche-y question here.
Yeah.
Is your data specific to industry, or does it actually get deep into actual target company?
Yeah. So we kind of do both. So the way that our platform works is we aggregate a bunch of, I say a bunch, it's roughly 300,000 public and private company globally, their entire financial statement data. So we absorb tons of raw data from our data providers. We synthesize all of that information and we calculate it based on our standards, based on our algorithms to determine both industry level benchmark data. So you can go into our platform and look at the aerospace and defense industry within the US and see how it's performing over the last four years. Or we also do individual company based analysis. So you can go in, you can look up a public company for our clients where we absorb their private company data. You can go in and look at private company data and you can see how they're being benchmarked against that same industry. So if I'm looking at an aerospace and defense company, I can see how that company's performing within the US against their industry and where solutions may come into play, right? So if I see something like the company is operating at the lowest possible benchmark for payable days, right? That there may be a solution in there to talk to the company around commercial card, around supply chain finance. There's a bunch of different opportunities there. And it's really I say it's in the eyes of the beholder, but it's really in the hands of the banker to then go and have that conversation based on that analysis. And what's great is the platform will actually tell you, hey, listen, this company is operating at the bottom quartile of payable days. Here's a conversation you should bring to them using the platform. And it's not just benchmark, it's interactive scenarios as well. So we allow the bankers to then go in and play around with, okay, if I reduce or if I increase their payable days, what's the capital release to the bank or to the company? And how do they want to use that capital for next year? What's the value it brings to the company? Because none of this has to do with the bank. It only has to do with the business.
Now, can you load in like kind of like the bank's products and different things like that so that you can have a conversation? So, like you want to get into the aerospace industry, you've you have that introduction, right? You've targeted them, you have an initial conversation, you sign an NDA, whatever it may be, you collect some financial data. Can you then upload this financial data against these things so that you could have like a constant conversation? And then can you actually say, okay, so you work for JP Morgan Chase, you know that JP Morgan has all of these specific products available to then fix or meet the needs of said client?
Yeah. So we our platform is what we call a white label platform, right? So it's highly customizable to our clients. So every client calls their product something different, right? And so we change our product descriptions in our platform based on our clients if they so choose. They can change, everything would be brand and compliance related. So we work with their branding teams, we work with their compliance teams to make sure that it's all to their standards, whether it be ADA compliance or color compliance, right? And then on top of that, if they want specific things built out, we do customizable decks, we do customizable features, right? We will work with the bank to make sure that it fits their needs exactly the way that it needs to be fit. And so it's not just a turnkey. Yes, we do have a turnkey solution, but for our clients where they want something very specific to their bank, we work with them to design all of that, to implement it. And yeah, we do have the capability of the bank can upload the company financials. Just a heads up, we do that very securely. We work with their legal teams and their compliance teams to make sure it's very secure. Or we have API data feeds. So we can automatically just consume that data on a weekly, daily basis. So that way, when bankers log in, their clients' financials are already in the system and they can just go right to their client and do the analysis.
Very cool. So now you brought up something else that, again, just kind of triggered something in my head. But from a portfolio management standpoint, I think that this could be a very interesting solution, right? So if there's something that comes out, national headlines on a specific industry, that's going to then flag back to you on your portfolio to say like, hey, you might want to have this conversation or ask whether it be tariffs or, things like that. It triggers then to start having those conversations.
So it won't trigger in the system. And this is where the banker still has to play a role, right? And I have this tariff conversation fairly often with bankers. How do you model out tariffs in the system? How do you talk to companies that are facing tariffs, and what is the impact to the business? And all of that stuff shows up as a product within the system itself. So the consumer goods industry, right? Over the past quarter, you'll start to see a fairly large drop in the net profit margins of most consumer-based businesses because of tariffs and the increase of tariffs that they've had to pay. So that's a conversation point that the banker should be having with their client. Now, in terms of portfolio analysis, I can then build out an entire portfolio of only consumer-based goods within the platform. And I can track that portfolio of clients to see which client is potentially dragging that entire portfolio down. Now I can do portfolio level analysis to understand, okay, the consumer goods industry in the shoes sector is performing well below the consumer goods in the apparel sector, right? So now I can kind of understand where I'm at most risk for my portfolio and how to stay ahead of that throughout situations like tariffs.
Yeah, no, very interesting. Because, this is all super helpful to arm people with this because, what I've seen, right, is, working for kind of super regional banks and things like that, they're hiring a lot of people to just go out and be finders, right? Like, you're on top of the mountain at 12:31, right? Yeah. And you're like, yeah, I crushed this year. I hit all my goals. And then all of a sudden it cracks midnight and everybody's cheering. And I'm going, yep, I'm back to zero, right?
Back to zero.
There's not as much unfortunately, right, there's not as much focus on that existing portfolio because you're like, ugh, I have to go out and find more. And then I have found at least that unless you have a kind of a strong portfolio management team to be able to keep you up to date with these things. So it sounds like I2I is just really making it easier for the bankers themselves to stay kind of relevant within these conversations and keep up with that and be able to kind of see around the corner as to what might be a concern in the future.
But you bring up a great point, right? Because as a banker, you build this entire portfolio of clients, right? And then at 12/31, it resets. So your entire goals have reset. However, every banker does the exact same thing. They look at their portfolio and they say, okay, now I need to go bring in 5 new clients and $1 billion or more loans, right? Something astronomical. But they're not looking at their existing client base. This is the problem that we see, is that this is what we call like the long tail of commercial banking, right? Is that you have a bunch of clients that make up your portfolio that you see once a year for compliance purposes to make sure that you're checking the KYC box. But they're sleepy. They're not really doing a whole lot. You don't get a lot of revenue out of them. You don't want to spend a lot of time with it. But that's where the platform shines, is those are the clients where they're kind of forgotten in the portfolio. And bankers tend to just say, yeah, they're just going to keep doing what they're doing and we're not going to bother it. But another bank is going to step in and they're going to look at the value of that company and they're going to say, well, I have AR factoring as available to me. There's deposits sitting in another bank that I can collect. There's all these cross-sell opportunities. Yet nobody's looking at. We had a client who launched the platform. Within 5 months, they brought in hundreds of cross-sell opportunities, hundreds, because they thought they had 100% of the wallet. But when they went back and they looked at the platform and looked at all the analysis, there were clients that they started asking questions of, and they realized that it wasn't really 100%. There were 4, 5, 6, 7 opportunities that they were missing out on because they weren't asking the right questions. That's the value of the platform, is there is still revenue to be had for some of your clients, but at the same time, you can help them achieve their goals effectively.
Yeah. And then what ends up happening, right, is like they, once they figure out, like, they're like, man, my banker's really asking me a lot of questions that no other bankers are asking me.
That's right.
And then when they're out in the market talking to their friends that have a similar business, then there's more opportunity. Like, that's why we said, like, I love getting a portfolio. Even people go, ugh, you get this portfolio, you got to, like, I love going in there because I know the last guy wasn't paying attention to it enough to see what else was out there. But now if I had I2I, man, like, that would be amazing.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
Let's get into the future of banking. I mean, where do you see things going? How can the listeners here? So, I would say our listener base is, entrepreneurs and executives that are business owners that are running a business. And then I have a lot of people that are just like you and I that are in this banking industry. Talk about the future of banking the way you see it, and how can business owners and people be kind of prepared for this to have the best results from it.
Yeah. It's a conversation that comes up really often, right? What does this landscape look like? I think, some of us are getting really sick of hearing Gen AI, right? ChatGPT, all of the such. I think if you're able to embrace that, right, at least learn about it, you'll start to understand the value that it will bring. It's funny, what my founder said, that we're kind of sitting in the midst of the industrialization of generative AI. It's happening right before our eyes, and it's happening very quickly. And almost every business is adopting generative AI some way or somehow, whether they know it or not. And it can be anything from Copilot in your Microsoft suite to using Gemini on Google, right? Or just logging into ChatGPT and asking it random questions. I mean, there's so many different ways that they're adopting it, but banks especially are in the midst of what I would say they were looking at back in like the 70s, right? When the internet really started, when internet banking really started to take off and starting to get away from analog and going to digital based banking. A lot of banks really struggled with that. They struggled with the fact that they weren't going to need as much people, or they weren't going to need as many processes, that there's not as much paper being used. Now we're starting to see the same thing. Banks are very hesitant with AI. Some are coming out with marketing techniques to say we're fully adopting it. And others are just very reserved because they're unsure. They're unsure how clients are going to react. They're unsure how employees are going to react. But the future of banking, without a doubt, includes AI, hands down. And let me make a caveat to that, because my AI people will say, well, AI has been around forever. They're starting to use generative AI. That will 100% without a doubt happen. It's the matter of how they use generative AI, right? Some banks are going to adopt it very slowly, and they're going to start putting it in like Copilot, right? Their employees can use it for efficiency purposes, start creating different tasks to allow the employee to do more with their free time. Others will start adopting it in back-end operations to help with data visualization, to help with data cleanup, to help with the loan process origination. And then you have these banks where they will fully adopt the immersive technology of AI, and it will get away from back-end operations to help with back-end ops, to help with what I would even call like retail client servicing techniques, and start finding ways to help with all aspects of the business. And that means right into client-facing commercial banking. How do we enable generative AI to have a conversation? I don't think we're that far off. I think with what we are doing within the generative AI space to create a digital banker will be something of the norm in the future. And that's really for that long tail client, for that client where you don't see them very often, but still wants a white glove service, right? That's generally reserved for your top 20% of clients. But you can offer that service to all of your clients with generative AI. Now, imagine a world where you interact with a banker that looks like a person, but it is an AI bot who is asking you thought-provoking questions, who is asking you how you're viewing your outlook, what the industry outlook looks like for you, how you're performing within your industry, providing you interactive feedback on your financial position within the industry. And then there's a real person in the bank reading those reports, understanding your pain points, and coming back to you with very thought-provoking material on how to implement an equity capital markets origination, right? Or how to think about selling the business to private equity, right? And so there's a lot of things that can come from that. I think we're doing ourselves a disservice by shying away from it. I think there's a lot of banks out there that are shying away from it because it's too expensive. But there are fairly cheap ways now to implement AI, generative AI, that will create a lasting impact on the business.
Yeah, I think that what I like about this, right, is, and I think it's really the brilliance of what I2I is doing is it's helping the banker be more prepared to have these conversations.
That's right.
Because the one thing that I keep saying to people, and it's funny because I'm actually, I wrote a book on it. I have a course that I'm putting together with it now that I'm actually rolling out at like Seton Hall University, TCNJ, right? I'm not scared of AI. Like, I'm really not scared of AI.
No.
I don't think that it's going to be like Terminator 2 Judgment Day with these robots and everything like that. Like, people are going to have red eyes and stuff like that. Like, that's not going to happen. But with what I2I is doing, it's like, okay, here's a way to have a better conversation. Now, it's not going to teach you how to talk to people, though. And that's still what we need to work on, right? And so what I say to anybody is, like yourself, like I say to anybody, it's like, well, how do I stay ahead of this? You still have to have the soft skills to be able to have those conversations. You have to be able to build rapport. but you have to have the knowledge base to be a helpful resource to people at the same time. And AI is not going to do that.
So, and don't be mistaken. Like in the banking world, there will always be people, right? There will always be a relationship aspect to a bank. It's about how do you make that relationship better, right? It can't just be, and a lot of my banker friends and colleagues are going to hate this. It cannot just be a banker going out and playing golf with their client 3 times a year or having dinner or having drinks. Like that's not going to be enough anymore. It's going to have to turn into something that is more thought-provoking, that you are helping your client grow, that you are strategizing with them. And so I think generative AI will 100% help you do that, as long as what you said, you still have those soft skills. I mentor a lot of students and I tell them all the time, you have to be able to have a conversation with anyone. You need to understand what that means to have a conversation. And sometimes those conversations are going to be tough and they're going to be uncomfortable. But to be able to ask the right questions and have that conversation will 100% move you in the right direction.
Amazing.
It's so important.
It's amazing. Really is important. And you and I are definitely out there beating the same drum. We're almost out of time for the episode. So I just want to go through a couple things just because I'm a big fan of you personally, like I said.
Appreciate that.
Is there anything that you're doing, Blake, outside of I2I on a daily basis to just kind of make yourself more effective? Any like habits or routines, any books that you've read lately that just like really knocked your socks off? I mean, what are you doing to feed the amazing soul that is Blake Balsamo?
Yeah, listen, one of the things is that I find it extremely important that you take time to do the things that you like, right? We all get sucked into this life of work, right? And we're constantly thinking about different ways to network and on LinkedIn and talking to people and trying to make connections and all of those things. And I just try to take time as much as I possibly can, wherever I can, to do the things that I enjoy, whether that be woodworking or doing projects around the house or whatever kind of gets my mind out of that funk of just burnout, right? Because burnout is real. People face it every day. It is a tough thing. And so I think, I do read a lot. I used to read a lot of self-help books. I mean, listen, Mel Robbins' most recent book is incredible and I absolutely loved it. I tend to read a lot more thriller books. It really gets my mind like completely out of this world and I step into another dimension. But it's one of those things where I just try to unplug wherever I can. Because you can get really bogged down.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So what is, obviously there's a lot of bankers that are going to be listening to this, how can people engage you and I2I? What's the best way to get in touch with you? Obviously we'll put all, whatever we have in the show notes just to make sure people can get in touch with you. But I mean, if somebody wants to just take a kind of a spin through what this, the product looks like and how to use it, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, listen, I mean, the best way to get in touch with me is on my LinkedIn page, right? I'm constantly on LinkedIn, as I mentioned, or just going to our company's website, ilogic.com. You'll learn a lot about our business. You'll learn, we've got plenty of demo videos and things going on there. Or just kind of reaching out to me through Michael, right? I mean, Michael's a great resource of mine. He's a great network of mine. And so, it's great to have him in my network. But yeah, I think LinkedIn, our website, or Michael is the best way.
I love it. I feel very special. But the one thing I was going to say, just to add to what you're saying, is like unplugging and doing all those things to, remove the burnout. I think one of the beautiful things is like what you and I are doing. We actually get a chance to work together it's almost like hanging out with your buddy. And instead of talking about like the baseball game or the football game, you and I get together socially to unplug and relax, but we talk about strategy and what's kind of holding us back. So like, that's the one thing that's been really cool for me, where it's like, it's not so much about work anymore. It's about
Right.
working on business with other people in my network, which has been really exciting.
It's really interesting you say that too, right? Because like that I would consider like a mentor relationship between the both of us, right? Mentor, mentee, both ways. And that's the one thing I cannot stress enough to people is you have to have people that you can go to and ask advice for, right? And just work problems out. Like that's also part of getting out of that burnout cycle is you need to be able to talk to people about what's going on in your business, how to strategize, how to switch kind of what that strategy might be to help you, right? I think that is unbelievably important in this business world is that you have to have those mentors that you can go to and rely on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I could not have said it better myself. So I can't let you go without asking you the $1 million question, and just for the record, he already heard the $1 million question because I didn't want to stump him. Not that you can stump this guy here, but Blake, when you look back on your journey, personally and professionally, what's one moment that felt really small at the time, but ended up changing everything for you?
Yeah. So I had an interview prep before my role at Goldman Sachs with a gentleman. His name is Mike Matarasso. He was a partner at Franklin Templeton, and he was connected to my school. And so somebody, and I don't remember who it was, it might have been the chair of our department, organized an email introduction. And I emailed him and said, hey, listen, I've got an interview with Goldman Sachs and I would love if you can kind of help me prepare for that. And it was, now looking back, it was absolutely incredible. Then I was like, great, I'm going to meet this guy. He's going to help me prepare. But now I look back and I got invited to go to Franklin Templeton headquarters. I sat in his corner office with him and he had me sit in front of him and practice my entire interview. And we went through it for almost an hour. And he was going through, I would say this, I wouldn't say this. These are the tough questions you're going to ask. And I was unbelievably prepared for that interview. And it was just such a life-changing moment. Now, looking back, that then I was like, this is just another person helping me. But how busy he was and the fact that he took time out of his day to help me is just absolutely incredible.
It's amazing. That's amazing, right? I mean, and that's the power of your network and not being afraid to ask for that, that type of help. I mean, I shot you a message the other day and I was like, I need your brain. I need you to help me forge my path here in a couple of questions I have. But Blake, it was a pleasure having you on the show. I really enjoyed the conversation. I think this could be really helpful for a lot of people. So if you guys really want to start changing the conversation about the way that you do business, please reach out to Blake. Please reach out to me. Check out the I2I Logic website. We'll have everything in the show notes. And Blake, I'll see you soon, my friend.
Thanks so much, Michael.